successfully.
Author, journalist Christopher Hitchens, is there any relevance to the Odyssey in today?
Just like to say that even that minimum is not indisputable. We're not absolutely certain Homer was one real person. I've been to the rock on Chios where he is supposed to have sat, but Chios is only one of, I believe, 7 places that claims him, and there was a later poet who said, 7 cities now contend for Homer dead, through which the living Homer begged his bread, which goes to show that bards, no more than prophets, are honored in their own country. Yes, to your point of relevance, even if it was the work of many hands, and the oral tradition or the griot, as you seem to imply with your drum, absolutely it's relevant, because from your very first invocation we get the idea of hubris and nemesis, right, which is the thing we can't do without in ordinary discourse. There are certain punishments that appear to fall on people that, for original arrogance or conceit, that we can't conceive of relating grand stories without. Nostalgia, a very overused and sentimentalized term now, which literally means, and can only really mean, the yearning to go home, to be home again, and nothing else will do. The extraordinary caprice of the gods, the eternal conundrum, at least for believers: if there are gods, why are they so mean to us? Or if there is a god, why is he so mean to us? Which can be solved by having lots of gods and different caprices, rival caprices. All of this, and all through our modern literature, there are people who've been stirred by it, who've tried to reinterpret it, from James Joyce in our century just closing to Alexander Pope and Chapman. People think of it as the original narrative of the striving of humanity and of the need also to beware of what you want, in case you ever do, as Cavafy says, finally get home to Ithaca. It may turn out that it's better to travel hopefully than to arrive.
Jay Bottom, do you remember the first time that you met the
account of, or this isn't a simplistic virtue here, a virtuous man, a simplistic account. What Homer gives us is a world in which we're not faced with that dichotomy, where there's the simplistic, stupid virtue stuff, and then there's the more complex human stuff, as though that were the divide. He lives in a world in which virtue itself is complex, in which the virtues themselves are interrelated and awkwardly composed. When Aristotle writes the Nicomachean Ethics, he gives a list of some of the virtues, and he includes, for instance, among them, luck. Now, the idea that luck could be a virtue, right?
That's what Bonaparte used to ask of his general.
Right, exactly. I want you to be as lucky.
There's only one officer-like quality I'm looking for, which is luck.
But the fact that we could hear that and think luck, virtue, those words just don't go together, is proof that the virtue world that they're living in here has been fundamentally changed by Christianity, maybe finally emptied by Christianity. That these heroic virtues, although Christianity took them over and redirected the honor of them. The honor for the Greeks is you get the, if you're a virtuous man, you mean you're courageous, you're strong, you're wily, you're lucky, you get the good things. You get the money, and you get the pretty women. But, for a Christian, this is the same thing. If you're virtuous, if you have the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity, if you have the 4 cardinal virtues, you get the good things, except the good thing has changed. The good thing is heaven. Right? It's only the reward has changed. But the end result, it seems to me, after 2,000 years of having that change take place, is the words themselves are finally emptied. If the culture doesn't believe in heaven, Christianity killed off our ability to see the old rewards as the honors for virtue. And if the culture has ceased to believe in heaven, then we no longer have any reward at all for virtue, and the words themselves become empty.
But there've been a lot of attempts. Gladstone made one, Dante made one, to try and assimilate the great Greek epics to Christianity and to make them look as if they were sort of pre-Christian but prefigured ideas of the same dilemmas, which I think are all doomed to fail. The only thing they have in common is that it becomes very clear indeed from reading the Odyssey that, in contrast to what the Bible teaches us, God did not make man in his own image, man made gods in his own image. These are anthropomorphic gods. They are invented by us, as all gods are. That's indisputable. The other element that I think which I'm surprised you didn't touch on, is that Odysseus doesn't really have free will. Things happen to him. The tests he undergoes are test of fortitude, of endurance. How will he take it? But the idea that he can be the master of his fate or the captain of his soul is quite absent. It isn't really his fault. He's the plaything of other forces, and
his
including
crew opens the bag and lets the wind out. His crew kills the cattle.
I
would have
Helen,
to,
a god made her do it.
Which is where Jesus puts evil spirits.
Right. But I'd have to disagree with your analysis. I mean, if the old classical virtues don't hold up and the society no longer believes in heaven, I think it's chauvinistic to assume that one needs to be a Christian to be virtuous or to aspire to it. I mean, Christians are not a majority on the planet, and yet there are people in other cultures who certainly have notions of, and in our own, I'm not a Christian, but I adhere to notions of virtue and nobility, and you look for them where you can find them. I mean, I take what I can from Christianity, I take what I can from literature, I take what I can from history.
But one of the things we're reaching for is that you can't take what you want from Christianity and from Homer because they're not reconcilable. That you're going to make a mishmash if you do that. But here's the other thing. I'm not sure that it is true that any other culture than Western culture has a concept of virtue, because virtue itself, what we mean, this is a social construct. It's something that was given to us. It's a way of understanding the world that we inherited. If you go to other cultures to look for virtues in any meaningful sense of that word, you're looking for Western-style things in them.
But they have, I mean, Buddhists, Hindus don't have notions of superior behavior as opposed to inferior behavior. Maybe they don't use the word virtue, but
here's a good example. Justice. We said, you asked the question, is it justice that the 108 suitors die? Your very ability to ask that question means that you've lived through a Christian era, right? And also probably come to the end of it, because of course it is justice that they die. It's poetic justice.
That's a question
it's the justice of the story.
That's a question Socrates would have been perfectly capable of asking and of considering. It's absolutely not true. We don't know. Christianity has added exactly nothing to our consideration of what is virtuous. Absolutely nothing at all.
Mercy?
All it's added is certain supernatural reinforcements. No faith, hope, and charity. No, a lot of these are filched from early Judaism, and many of them are, and it's an acknowledged indebtedness, furthermore, because otherwise why would so many Christians, like Gladstone and Dante, go back all the time to try and prove that the extreme sensitivity to matters of ethics in classical Greece were such as to make Christianity superfluous? They had to say, no, it's a prefiguration of it. It's what...
I just can't accept that. The parable of the prodigal son would be unintelligible to Homer. It would be unintelligible to...
as it is.
Right, it would be unintelligible to say that if you're not a Christian, of course it is.
It says that selfishness and greed and taking no thought for the morrow are rewarded. It's an amoral story, the parable of the prodigal son.
Well, then this is what Professor Lombardo was talking about.
Christianity is in itself amoral.
The moralized
it depends on vicarious redemption. It's scapegoating. It's simply throwing your sins onto another and punishing him or her. It's traditional desert culture scapegoating.
Professor,
it's morally a huge step backwards.
Professor, we're going to ask you to get ready to